All right, guys, I have a conspiracy theory. Brought in my special hat. I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, twitch.tv/ESPN 97.5. Custom made. 4 pieces of aluminum foil, baby. So I don't think it's that crazy to believe that a much more self-aware ownership group might have pressed Nick Caserio into taking C.J. Stroud at pick number 2, which is interesting because, as discussed in the break, they're probably not thrilled with any quarterback who is a client of the NFL's most powerful agent, David Mulligeta, especially with what happened with Deshaun Watson not too long ago. But ownership had to know that fans would remain checked out without some sort of quarterback to sell going forward, right? So I find it interesting that we got this little tidbit from Jonathan Alexander of the Chronicle a couple of days ago. I've gone back and forth between Alabama defensive end Will Anderson and Ohio State quarterback C.J. Stroud. But I had a source tell me Wednesday that the Texans have been inquiring about Stroud and his background in recent days, more so than they had previously. And that sounds straight out of the movie Draft Day. Because if you watch the movie Draft Day, Kevin Costner's character, the general manager of the Browns, trades up to the number 1 overall pick. And then they say, all right, my bad. We didn't do any due diligence on the presumed number 1 quarterback to be taken. Let's start digging. It does sound similar. Not completely similar, where they didn't do any research on it. This Kevin Costner character seems like a complete dumbass in the movie. But something to keep in mind. Because also factor in this. There were rumors about Nick Caserio potentially leaving the Texans after the draft. Could that have come from Nick Caserio perhaps venting to his people that he communicates with from time to time that might have media ties, that he doesn't have full say over what the Texans are doing at the top of the draft? And to wrap up my conspiracy theory with my cute little tinfoil hat on, maybe the trade up for Will Anderson was a compromise with ownership. Ownership's like, well, we got all these picks. If you want Will Anderson, we'll get Will Anderson. But we will also get C.J. Stroud. So that way, you guys, and as you saw from Caserio and DeMeco, they were pumped about the Anderson pick. You didn't see the reaction that they had to drafting C.J. Stroud. They get a quarterback for ownership, and they get the best defensive player in the draft for themselves. And we'll see how it all plays out from here. But that is my conspiracy theory. I think it is plausible that ownership, sensing that same old Texans could have been a thing, which, by the way, some of you people who are mad about the trade up for Will Anderson seem to be mad that they're not being the same old conservative Texans that are operating with like a Patriots mindset. It is, I think, possible that they pressed for Stroud and compromised with Will Anderson in the middle. Thoughts, Sean Mape, on that? Beautiful tinfoil hat conspiracy.
Well, it's Sean Mapes with an S at the end.
Did I say Sean Mapes?
You said Sean Mape. You
Sean
singleized
Mape?
it. Yeah.
My bad.
No, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think it makes all the sense in the world, because part of the reason I think it makes sense is that the Texans don't really look that good. If that's the case, that they basically had to like King Solomon it and like be like, all right, guys, DeMeco, you'll get your guy. Ownership, you'll get your guy. And like that's what Caserio had to do on draft day is, all right, well, we want 2 different guys. You know what? I'll get both of them. And I don't love that. I would love to have a more, aligned organization in that way. But, I mean, at the end of the day, you got C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson. Like, you can't complain that much about that.
I'm not complaining that much about it because where this organization was, Sean, was hell. They had to do something like this.
Yeah, also,
which is a shame, but they did actually have to make a splash. Like, this was not going to be a successful draft if they got the good players, because they need to generate interest from today through September. They need people to start thinking about them again at all, which my show, barely paid attention to them last year. And football is all I care about if we're being perfectly honest. The Astros are good. If the Astros weren't good, sorry, I would barely talk about baseball. But again, you change the way that the show goes because of that, right? But we were not even talking about them. Most fans didn't want to hear about them. They had to do something to get the average person out there back in. And I know there's a lot of smart football fans here, right? A lot of people that think very highly of their football acumen. And you're looking at this and you're like, this was crazy. But you are not the majority. You're not. I wish at times you were, but you're not. So there's a very, very likely possibility that this was one of the factors that led to the Texans making this move. I don't think it's disastrous for that to be the case. I don't. I'm not the Killer Bees who are pissed about the trade up to go and get Will Anderson. I saw a text earlier. Someone said, well, you could have stuck around and taken Will Levis. Maybe Will Levis isn't very good considering how far he's fallen. I mean, didn't people think that Malik Willis was a potential a first-round pick last year? And then look how far he fell. And then look at what he looked like when he was on the field. Like the Titans signed Josh Dobbs. They thought he sucked so much.
They could have kept the 33rd pick and picked Will Levis. They could have kept. Will Levis might be there at 65 or whenever the third round pick is.
Mm-hmm. So. He might. That's true. 713-780-3776 to call into text in as well on the most interactive sports talk show in Houston. We've got Thomas, our friend in the Heights. Thomas, what's up?
Hey, what's up, Paul? Your conspiracy theory really triggered me.
Oh no.
I was like anti. If you're not going to get young, you don't believe in a quarterback, just draft best available, build your foundation, trust in DeMeco. You know what? Give Caserio more time to work or whatever. But it did seem really odd and weird at the moment, and then give up a bunch for move up to take the guy that you're speculated to take originally. I don't know. I mean, I understand the splash and the marketing or try to get the hype, but it's crazy that the ownership would listen to a fan base that wants to win this year when that's not a plausible thing. So it's
Thomas, though, I'm going to slightly push back on that characterization. I don't think it's them listening to the fan base. I think it's realizing where the fan base is. Now, they hadn't listened to the fan base for a while, and I do think that they are a lot more self-aware than they've been in years past because they are listening to a degree. But I think that this isn't a listening to the fan base move as much as it's a trying to get the fan base to listen to you move. You're trying to win them back.
And it's also not really a win now move either.
No, it's not.
It's still drafting a 22-year-old and a 21-year-old or however old these guys are. It's not, going all in. It's not making the Russell Wilson trade. That's not what they did.
Right. And by the way, speaking of Russell Wilson, this is not what's going to make and break them. Everyone, you focus on the first-round picks. You guys remember the Rick Smith era, right? How many first-round picks did they nail? They were great at first-round picks for a long time. Think about it. J.J. Watt, Whitney Merciless, DeAndre Hopkins, Jadeveon Clowney. He was a good player. You can't argue against that. Kevin Johnson was not, but you had Kareem Jackson as a first-round pick. I forget who they took in the first round in 2016 off the top of my head. Deshaun Watson in 2017. You had Dwayne Brown in 2009. Brian Cushing. Although was Brian Cushing a second-round pick? But you've had a really good track record of first-round picks. What did that lead to? It's about what you do in the third, fourth rounds. You got to hit. And there's more pressure on Caserio for today than there was yesterday.
Texans draft Will Fuller in the
Will Fuller was a good pick in 16. He got hurt a lot, but Fuller was a good pick. Rick Smith did a damn good job as general manager in the first round. But where did that get him? You got to find guys in the middle of the draft. And last year was a pretty good start for Caserio, all things considered. The first year is kind of a wash. He barely had any picks to play with. This year, and specifically today, with those 2 third-round picks that they have, are they going to move up? Are they going to trade back? Today is where they got to hit some home runs if they're going to be anything different. You go back to a team that I used to cover, but I'm familiar with the history of. The Seahawks in 2011 and 2012 did an incredible job of finding mid to late round talent. And that's how that team became so good overnight. Like Cam Chancellor, bargain bin. Richard Sherman, 5th round pick. Yeah, they got Earl Thomas early, but they found a bunch of guys late. That's how you win. And I get it. Giving up a first round pick next year or a second round pick next year, when you, by the way, still have a first and second round pick next year, maybe not as high as you would ideally want, you can't look at that as a complete mistake because, yeah, it hurts, but you got to find guys today. Round 2, round 3, round 4. Those are the most important rounds in a draft.